So we've reached the end of an era. At the end of Parshat Vayechi, Yaakov is on his deathbed, and he gathers each of his sons individually first and gives them each a blessing. And finally, with his last couple of breaths, he asks all his sons to huddle around, and he gives them one last message. And his sons are waiting for something wise, something profound. You know, Yaakov has a lot of life wisdom. He went through a lot of emotional roller coasters. He must have something really profound to say in his last moments on earth. And Yaakov first begins by saying, guys, when I die, I want you to bury me in that same cave, Ma'arat HaMachpelah, in which my ancestors are buried, back in Israel. And the sons are nodding okay, but they're waiting for the punchline. But Yaakov continues. You know, it was a cave that my grandfather Abraham bought to be this familial ancestral plot. And they're nodding, again waiting for that punchline. But Yaakov continues. It was the cave in which Abraham and Sarah were buried in. And it was the cave in which Yitzchak and Rivka were buried in. And it was the cave in which my wife Leah was buried in. And they're waiting. That profound moment's about to come. And then Yaakov dies. And that's it. And it's super anticlimactic. And you'd expect there to be something more. And it's such a shame that Yaakov's last words on earth were these technical details about him being buried in this cave. And even if it's true that unfortunately these were Yaakov Avinu's last words, why did the Torah have to record it? You'd expect that if the Torah is recording something at the end of Yaakov's life, it would record something powerful or inspirational or meaningful. But this? What's so special about Yaakov wanting to be buried in the same cave as his parents and his grandparents? Unless, maybe that's the point. That in his last moments on earth, Yaakov Avinu was telling his kids, and by extension us, a super powerful lesson. That Yaakov Avinu wants to be connected to his ancestors and to the land and the culture in which they grew up. And Yaakov is telling his kids that even though you guys are now in a new land, you're in Egypt and you're not in Israel, you have to still try to maintain that connection to the past, connection to your ancestors, connection to your history. I want to do that, and I want you to continue the chain as well. It explains why Chazal go around saying Yaakov Avinu lo met, that Yaakov never died. Because in a sense, he didn't die. Because in a sense, if his kids are continuing on the same legacy as him, then Yaakov is living vicariously through them. It's why in next week's parsha, the beginning of Sefer Shemot, we begin V'ela Shemot B'nei Yisrael Habeim Mitzrayma, that these are the names of the kids of Yaakov who were coming down to Egypt. And then the Torah begins to list the kids of Yaakov. And who's the first name on the list of the kids of Yaakov? Yaakov. Well, why is Yaakov listed on the list of one of his kids? Isn't Yaakov dead? Haven't we moved on to a whole new era of Jewish history? No. Because Yaakov is living vicariously through his kids. As long as his kids are continuing on his legacy, it's as if Yaakov isn't dead. And that's Yaakov's parting message on his deathbed. That even though from the beginning of Sefer Shemot and onwards, Judaism shifts, because Judaism becomes about laws and rules and regulations, and it becomes this nation, this legal society. We have to remember that before the Jewish people were a nation, they were once a family. And that's what Sefer Bereshit is all about. It's not about the laws, it's not about the rules, it's not about the regulations, but it's about the familial side of the Jewish people. And Yaakov Avinu was telling them, even though you guys are going to move on to become society, to become this nation, don't forget about your family. And if you're part of a family, then you have to remember your history. You have to make sure you're connecting back to your ancestors, connecting back to your roots. And that the kind of family you have nowadays, the kind of religion, the kind of Judaism you're practicing, it needs to be recognizable to your grandparents and your great-grandparents, because you're not just something that's existing in a vacuum, but you're part of this long chain. You want to make sure that there's continuity from one step of the chain to the next. And yes, change is important. And in Judaism, we're supposed to have innovation. We have to adapt to the times, but we don't want to change and adapt too much that we become unrecognizable to our ancestors. That's exactly the lesson that Yaakov Avinu was telling us. We have to hold on to that Masorah, to that tradition, to that familial side to our religion, and make sure that our ancestors, whether the ones in the tents in Egypt, all the way to the tenements on the Lower East Side, and anything in between, from the shtetls in Europe and the villages in Spain and Babel, that they're all able to have recognized at least some semblance of the Judaism we're practicing nowadays. And we're not veering way too far off the path, even if we're working within the confines of halacha and within the confines of the text and the book. But if we do it so much that they can't recognize it anymore, then we're losing this familial aspect of Judaism. And that's something we really need to make sure we're putting in a lot of effort to maintain. Because right now, Am Yisrael is doing a great job in horizontal Achdus. What do I mean? We're doing a great job with unity amongst all the generations that are currently around nowadays in 2023. But in addition to horizontal Achdus, we have to work on our vertical Achdus. Not just connecting all the people on the earth today, but connecting all the generations going back in time. Making sure we're holding on to that chain. We're holding on to the familial aspect of Judaism. We're not neglecting our ancestors, but we're trying to do them justice and holding on to our roots and making sure our Judaism is recognizable to the Judaism that they preached. We want to make sure our ancestors back in Sefer Bereshis, when Judaism wasn't yet a nation, but it was just a family, they'd be able to look and recognize that we are their great, 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 great descendants. And that's the lesson Yaakov Avinu was trying to depart, both at the end of his life, but also at the end of the era, at the end of Sefer Bereshis. And it's a lesson that we need to put in a lot of effort to take to heart. Okay, something to ponder over Shabbos. Everyone have a great Shabbos. Bye-bye.